Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this DZone virtual roundtable sponsored by Synopsys. We've just released our latest trend report, Enterprise Security, Securing Applications Across the Software Supply Chain, which you can download at dzone.com. We'll be going over the findings of the report and looking at the most up-to-date trends in enterprise security so you can ensure that your applications are as secure across the software supply chain as they can be. If you find our conversation today valuable and want to see more content just like this, head on over to dzone.com/events to see all of our on-demand content. Before we get started, let's do some introductions. I'm Jesse, the Chief Technologist here at DZone, and your moderator for today's discussion. With me is a distinguished panel of experts, each bringing a wealth of knowledge and unique perspective. So first, Vishwa, say hi, Senior Associate at Publicis Sapient. And thanks for writing the article, A Practitioner's Guide to Security First Design. That was great. We also have Achuko, which was a technical writer at Indela. Thanks for joining us. Also wrote the article, Achieving Continuous Compliance, which was super awesome. Pratik, hi Pratik from Capital One, Principal Solution Architect, wrote The Art of Securing Cloud Native Mobile Applications. That one was super interesting too. And last, but definitely not least, Steven Zimmerman, Product Marketing Manager at Synopsys. Super excited to have you all here. Now, listen, we've got a lot of statistics to go over, right? We have our report. And before we get into that, I want to set the stage with kind of some broader market statistics. Enterprise security, as of 2024, we know is constantly changing and evolving and developing, but 86% of CISOs say their role has changed so much since they started that it's a completely different job. And that just goes to show you how dynamic this is and why we keep having security come up in our talks. AI is also kind of hot. About 70% of CISOs, those who report directly to the CEO, believe AI is both, good and bad, right? Helping attackers and us on the other side. And cyber attacks are on the rise. Back in 2023, 83% of CISOs in this one report from Splunk said that they had to pay attackers. So this is a real thing, right? I see Stephen shaking his head. This is real. This is something that is super important. And I'm so glad that you all could join us. But whenever we talk about software in the supply chain, there was a quote in the trend report that I wanted you to kind of respond to. And Stephen, I'll let you go first. A chain is no stronger than its weakest link. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. I will caveat that, I think, a little bit with
Okay.
the idea that most organizations, maybe they're not aware of the status of those links that you talked about in the supply chain.
Mm,
So I kind of as a heuristic equate that to you think of like Schrodinger's cat, where these links that we're talking about, they might be weak, they might be strong, but we just don't know their risk status until we either test them or until we find out about it through an incident or a breach. So it really does just kind of become pretty important for us to keep operating as if we are vulnerable or could be vulnerable at some point in the future, and just make sure we establish those security gates so that we can just automate as much as possible, so that if things go south when we're not looking, something bad happens as part of that supply chain, we're still covered.
Well, it doesn't exist, right? If it's Schrodinger's cat, I don't see it. But it's awesome. As we start digging into security, thanks for that. As we start digging into this, when we think about what the weakest link is, I keep thinking about the show, You Are the Weakest Link, Goodbye, right? We do. We want to say goodbye to the weakest links that we have in our supply chain, especially when it comes to securing our applications. But it means that we have to understand the potential threats. I think that's the point that you were trying to make, that the application faces. So to build on the data that we had in the report, right, we said in recent years, OWASP, we all know what that is, surveyed and identified the top security risks to web applications. Based on your experiences, rank the following web application security risks from most problematic to the top, and the least problematic at the bottom for you and your organization. So kind of a ranking thing. And the 2023 results were this. I'm going to read them. Then I want to know if you agree or disagree on why. Pratik, we'll start with you. Number one was insecure software design. right? And that's up from number 3 last year. Identification and authentication failures, right? That's up. That's the same, ranked number 2 last year and this year. Security misconfiguration, right? That one jumped from number 7 up to number 3. So, Pratik, any initial thoughts on these top 3 compared to 2022? Agree? Not?
Yeah, for the first one, like insecure software design, I kind of don't see a solid pattern of jumping it from rank 3 to rank 1. I kind of don't agree with that because solution architecting and the solutioning space is not getting changed since 2022 to 2023. So I don't see a clear pattern or a solid reasoning behind it, like why it's a jump. So for me, it's a kind of an unconclusive because software design was relatively the similar. What I can suspect is like it might be like the migration from the on-premise to the cloud or the hybrid environment can be reason of it because when you are solution architecting onto a hybrid environment, you have to live with the on-prem and the cloud solutions. That can be a reason, but I can just suspect that I don't have any solid reasoning to back this up. Onto the second one, I'm completely agree. Like the identification and authentication, that is IAM, is the solid one that we should take care of it. And most of the companies do the authentication, but they don't take care of the authorization bit of it. So I can completely in line with like this is the most one of the most and the one of the vulnerable ones. And even though if you are doing the authentication authorization, I have seen an experience. We are putting sufficient authorization, but we are not rotating the keys. We are not rotating the secrets and all. And we become complacent, like, okay, we have sufficiently authenticated it and we have sufficiently authorizing it, but we are not refreshing them, we are not authorizing them, and that become a kind of a leakage point to get onto that. So completely, on second point, I'm completely agreeing, like, okay, identification and authentication is the link. On the third one, I can completely sense why it is jumping from rank 7 to rank 3, because I can see a significant surge into the cloud adoption in last 2 years, like 2022 to 2023. Most of the enterprises and even this mid-scale and the smaller scale companies are migrating to the cloud. Most of the companies are now fully onto the cloud. Many of the companies are mostly onto the cloud, very small footprint onto the on-prem. That means most of your design is onto the managed services by the cloud. So you are adopting the managed services by any of the leading, you can take the name, but any of the leading cloud provider, most of the services underlying, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's a PaaS layer, or whether it's a SaaS layer, all are managed services. So what is left for you to solution design is the configuration. You are deriving the things by the configuration and where the security pitch in. If you are misconfiguring anything, you are doomed. And just to add on to that, apart from cloud adoption, SaaS adoption is like anything. You can see the 2023 will be the biggest SaaS adoption year coming ahead. I can see the trend in my company and the neighboring company I'm working with. So SaaS is kind of a low code or a no code. What you have to do in the SaaS is just configuration. So if you are misconfiguring anything, it means you are doomed. So that's why I come completely in line with that. I can't agree more. Like the security misconfiguration is the most vulnerable thing in today's days prevailing. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's jumping to the number 1.
Okay, it's a good point. Vishnu, you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree with it. This misconfiguration is one of the various aspect in the security which we need to give more attention in the coming years, because if you see, as the time passes and the new technology advances, there are some technologies that needs to interconnected, and those technology relies on the configuration with each other, be it you can say like logging frameworks which were just exploited previous year, log4j vulnerability.
I knew someone was going to say that.
Yeah, so that was the biggest misconfiguration, accessing the environment variables on anyone's PC or a server. So that was a misconfiguration. So I definitely agree with Pratik on that point.
Yeah. Very cool. And Chuko, you think these 3 kind of line up with what you think?
Yeah, I think it lines up with what I think, because I think misconfiguration as a whole is one of the biggest points. And my experience, aside from being a technical writer, also building software, especially in things like building web applications where you actually have to make sure you have some configurations, basic configurations set up. Whereas really beginner kind of software engineers who have maybe no standards in the team they have might make those mistakes, and that can become, an issue that might create a really big impact. So yeah, I agree that misconfiguration might be the biggest.
Okay. And Stephen, anything to add? I got a new question for you too.
Yeah. I think the
Sorry,
only thing I might.
can I add to the Biswas point? So the Log4j is a very classic example of the security breach. But I will call it's the open source vulnerability was the main reason behind the Log4j, because Log4j is the one of the most prominent open source uses across the industry. So we are listing just top 3, but if you look at the whole OWASP list, open source vulnerabilities are one of the most prominent one prevailing in the market today. So there's a separate topic, and it's a very funny topic to discuss about open source vulnerabilities and its adoption pattern and what are the secure ways to adopt it. So Log4j is one of the classical example of open source vulnerability, and that industry is now started taking it very seriously because open source was very lucrative one. Everyone's saying like, okay, we are getting a free ride onto the tools that is coming into the market. We don't have to pay anything. We don't have to put not much of the investment onto consuming it. Let's just piggyback onto it. But you don't know you are opening a back channel for getting a sneak peek into your ecosystem. And that's why open source become risky, and enterprises needs to be mature from the security perspective to start having a right kind of adoption and right kind of sanitization when you are opting for an open source adoption.
Yep, I agree. All right, Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add that what's interesting to me about this ranking is it's coming from security professionals, the respondents in this organization or others associated with OWASP, and we're coming from the protection or security side. And if I were to flip the script a bit and think like an attacker, we know that software vulnerabilities are a common attack vector. They have been for years, and it might actually be predicated. My ranking of these top 3 may vary depending on, from an attacker perspective, what information am I trying to get, where is it located, and what's the most likely path to success for me attaining that. And these 3 work very much in concert. Whether you're trying to exploit a web app or you're doing some sort of social engineering to gain unauthorized access, and you're compromising the supply chain to leverage issues with security misconfigurations in the build pipeline. These can all work in concert, and it's kind of predicated on how the attacker wants to proceed.
Okay. And do you think so? Our team added this statement that I want to ask to the group. And I want to know if you agree or why. Stephen, we'll start with you. Ensuring the security of one's own code is no longer enough to maintain overall application security.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think we alluded to this before. I think Pratik brought some topics to this point as well. But you can control everything possible about what you create, what you're pushing through your pipeline. But the second you ingest something that's outside of your dev teams, whether that's happening intentionally all the time, and it happens without us knowing it, like if transitive dependencies get resolved during your build cycle, you just can't attest to security at that point when we put it in the context of a supply chain. So we see this sort of validated by some of the regulations and standards that are starting to take shape now, requirements for things like SBOMs, the software bill of materials. That's sort of fostering or requiring transparency so that anyone along that supply chain can make a more informed decision about whatever security controls they're going to put into place.
Awesome. All right, Pratik, you're shaking your head, man. Get in there.
So ensuring the security of one's code is no longer enough or sufficient. I kind of agree on to a broader extent, but not completely. Because I was trying to emphasize onto the recent market trend of the cloud adoption, the low code adoption, and the no code adoption, and the SaaS adoption. Everything is becoming code. And you have heard of the term like infrastructure as a code. So when we are migrating to the cloud, when you are moving on to the SaaS or no code or low code platform, that's the market trend. I think sometime to come, everyone will be onto the cloud or either onto the SaaS or the low code or no code. Basically, you are writing code for everything. And if you are ensuring that everything is sanitized, everything is proper, you are responsible for ensuring the complete security of end-to-end. So market is moving on to a trend that is called monorepo. So you have a single repository where your infrastructure is also as a code, your configuration is also as a code, and your application is also as a code. So you have a complete ecosystem of code that is deriving everything from the managed infrastructure provider. So I would say now the onus is more onto the code to maintain the sanity of end-to-end things, because your code is deriving everything. Your code is provisioning the infrastructure, it is doing the security configuration, and it is your application code as well. So that's the thing. I would, by and large, the statement is true, but it is wrong in the modern trend. Is like everything is becoming code. At
Only
least
in the
it's
end
getting,
state.
yes,
Only in the end state when everything actually is code, right?
yes,
Just like when
yeah,
everybody actually does agile.
yeah. So
Yeah, it'll
as
take
Steve
a
was
lot.
mentioning, everything is a pipeline. So in your pipeline, everything is running as a code. Your infrastructure is also running as a code. Your security configuration is also going as a code, and your application is obviously was code and is code
Right.
and will be code. So I
Yeah.
think the onus is more onto the code.
Yep. Once we get, I agree on the end state. Vishwa, what do you think?
Yeah, low code, no code is a trend, and definitely it will dominate the market. So, whatever the responsibility is on the code, that's on the person who wrote it. Okay, so definitely that holds true for today. Yeah.
I got opinions on that. All right, Achoko, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it could be true to an extent as well. Taking off of what Patrick said, if you also think about it in the microservice architecture side of it, where you have like bigger companies like companies like GitHub, or you have really bigger companies that have different teams managing different services,
Yeah.
each team responsible to its own code. And then it's really hard for it to like create standards that every single team has to follow, especially when it has to come with different teams and different ways that they work. So yeah, to an extent, code could actually come into it. And I agree with that.
Okay. Well, that leads us into the next question, which is super awesome. How often, this was the question we asked in the survey, how often do you release code that you are not confident is secure? Now, almost half of respondents, 48%, indicated that they release code without confidence in its security. We assume this can be attributed kind of like the uncertain nature of application security or the break between code and that we just discussed, break between code and ensuring the total security of the app. But in your opinion, in your organization, have you had to pivot and change to accommodate frequent changes in the security landscape? And if you did, how did you do that? Because it seems like developers struggle a little bit for half of them to indicate that they're releasing code that they are not confident is secured. Right? Vishwa, why don't you start off with that one?
So I would say that once a developer is doing some dev work, okay, he only knows what the ACs are there in his work or task to be accomplished. But when it goes to the deployment phase, then there are various environments, lower environments, upper environments. So in lower environment, it might work fine, but for the upper environments, there are risks which the developer don't know. And here comes the play of security researchers and security analysts. But what happened in these middle-sized companies and like even in good companies, that they don't invest in security. They will take security very lightly. They will think, no, we won't be victim of ransomware, we won't be victim of this clickjacking, which is the various noob of the noob security vulnerabilities. So all these things gets away from the mind of the product owner and the, you can say, the deployment strategies. So we should always keep this in mind, and developers should be educated and advocated on the basic vulnerabilities. Let's say what happens, like you told that code or no code in the previous question. So if you follow this strategy, then we have AWS, which provide us the cloud solutions. But if a developer didn't read the documentation and he misconfigured it, his S3 bucket, and he allowed it for the public, then any attacker can write on his S3 and download all the information on S3. So that's the height of this scenario, that we have to read the documents, what the other society has provided to us. So I will definitely agree on it.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing. As software
Yeah.
gets more complicated, it's hard to
Yeah.
and y'all everything you're talking about is going to slow me down, and the business wants things done tomorrow. So it's a cost factor too. Stephen, you're shaking your head so hard, I got to call on you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing up the don't slow me down idea, right? I kind of think of it as meeting developers where they are. If part of this pivot, when I think of pivot, it's not that I want to go as a security professional, as an organization. We don't want to pivot to a completely different direction, right? It's just a slight inflection to accommodate these other changes. And some of these changes we've talked about, cloud native, cloud deployment, pipelines are changing. That starts bringing us more toward the different and distinct needs that the development teams are starting to have as they become more agile, Jesse, as you mentioned, or CI/CD. And I think of two requisite things that DevSecOps presents us is really just making sure that whatever pivot we make continues to drive that security in the direction we need it to go, and then hopefully enhances efficiency as well. So we certainly avoid impeding the development and release pipeline, and might even accelerate that pipeline as well when we can start avoiding all that rework from late stage security tests.
Now you're talking the business guy's language, right? So now your product managers are going to get more excited. All right, Pratik, based on what you know, like what are some recommendations that you would make to development teams so that they can be more confident when they're releasing their code?
Excellent question. I like this question. I was waiting for that. Okay. So just answering that before, in my role as a solution architect, I always being kind of a hinge between getting there faster and making it more secure, what Steve was mentioning. And security is always seen as a factor to slow it down. So I was always trying a balancing role between my product managers who are trying to release the feature as soon as possible, and my security ISOs who are always having a skeptical hat, like, okay, everything is going to be hacked every time. And I always have to play a balancing role. But my role is becoming easy because we are not just doing DevOps, we are doing DevSecOps, what Stephen was pointing out too. And it is not a one-day journey. We have invested a lot with experience, with tools, and with maturity and everything to reach from DevOps to DevSecOps. This journey is not easy. And to answer your question, like what are the recommendations I would suggest for every enterprises or all of the company to reaching from DevOps to DevSecOps is like, you should do your code scanning. You should do your static code analysis. You should do a software comparison analysis, software composition analysis that we in short-term market favor term, we call it SCA. And apart from that, we have embedded SAST, that we call it SATS, that is static application security testing, into our pipeline. So we are doing all the findings, we are doing all the vulnerabilities, we are doing all the potential threat detection within the pipeline without any human touch. Later on, we are doing a DAST as well. In loosely, we call it DAST, that is dynamic application security testing. So instead of just relying on to our pipeline and tools and all, we do interactive penetration testing as well. So you can see it as a kind of a human touch penetration testing. So on a requirement basis, we do a slight touch up onto our pipeline to do interactive performance penetration testing, because you might be having a sensitive data or encrypted data or data that cannot be accessed into the normal environment. So that you need a human intervention. We are doing another thing that is called DAST, that is called dynamic application security testing. It means it's a runtime penetration testing. So after having a static analysis and static penetration testing, we're doing a dynamic penetration testing where we are doing a kind of a real-time penetration thing. We would try to inject things into the code. We try to penetrate. We try to piggybacking onto something, so into our pipeline without any human touch, just to replicate a real-time environment. And at the later stage, into a mature state, we have IAST, that is called interactive application security testing, in which it's a very limited use cases, but we have the capability into our DevSecOps pipeline is like we do interactive penetration testing as well. So for example, in those applications where the data is encrypted or data is highly secure and highly sensitive, we cannot directly run through a pipeline. So we need a slight human touch where a human is coming and doing a kind of interactive penetration testing. So moving from a DevOps and the DevSecOps is the call of the day. For all the companies that want a security and the feature agility go hand in hand, and security should not be hindrance for it. You should include your static code analysis. You can include your static penetration testing. You can include your dynamic penetration testing. You can include your interactive penetration testing to reach from DevOps to DevSecOps. And obviously tools, like Stephen was mentioning, is the foundation for that. You can't achieve everything by programmatically. You have to have onboarded those tools so that your life will be easy. And at least people like me should have an easy job by balancing between product managers and ISOs.
Yeah, I can't imagine writing a static or dynamic code analysis tool from scratch. That's crazy. You definitely need a tool. Good point. Achuka, Vishwa, anything y'all would recommend?
Yeah, I think you guys have mentioned all the pretty automatic stuff and all the really nice tools. But I also think that some manual ways, some kind of responsibility is there to it to where the company has to kind of do adequate planning. Something around the threat modeling. So in the sense where they could also include exercises where the company comes together, the dev team, and maybe if they also have like a security team as well, they could come together and this is our plan for this application or this software, and these are the potential vulnerabilities that we foresee. And I think there are also tools for that. Probably you guys would know better than me. There are also tools to actually also model the threats and what to expect for certain codes before you actually push it out to the public to use. So I think these exercises as well would also help give people a second thought on what they should actually be thinking about, and what they should also be checking before they actually release their code.
Yeah, I love that. And I love it how it brings a more human element into it. Right. We were talking about advocating for the developers, doing something like getting together and running through exercises, having someone be a bad actor and try to actually get into it and script that out. That's kind of fun. Right. And it goes back to team building and bringing the human element back into development, which I think is really kind of cool. I do want to, okay, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, just to add one thing about this, because you mentioned the human element. I think when we think about the confidence aspect of this, because the question that we were discussing speaks to having this confidence in releasing secure code. And a lot of what we focus on is security risk awareness, right? We've talked about, Pratik introduced a lot of the types of testing that we can implement. The other half of this is our security capability, our ability to address whatever we do find. And I think that's an important recommendation that I would make to organizations is certainly focus on security risk awareness, but focus on security capability as well, basically finding it and then the fixing it side of it as well. And the closer in proximity along our timeline, whether it's the full CI/CD pipeline or it's just a developer's local workflow on their terminal or in their IDE, the closer we can get finding it and fixing it together, that's going to increase our confidence that we're more effective and more efficient at pushing secure code through the pipeline.
I love it. And so the next thing that I want to get to, kind of the role of security and development, as we're going to run out of time here in just a few minutes, but when we ask the community, at what stage of the software development lifecycle does your organization first implement security, the results were kind of split, really between design, planning, analysis, development, coding, and a little bit of other stuff, right? But 28% design, 25% planning, analysis, 21% development, coding, right? So keep that in your mind because everyone here recognizes the need and the value of having, security people, right, at your company. And so, we also asked, does your organization have people who specialize in application security? 77% said that they have those employees, right? Which largely models the data for the previous year. But 23% work, right, somewhere where there's not. So keeping those numbers in mind, I really want to know if you were to make an elevator pitch, right? If you were going to try to convince the 23% of those people on the importance and need for dedicated application security role, team, right? It doesn't have to be a new headcount. What would you say?
Yeah, I can hop in. Happy to.
Go for it.
Yeah, I would probably try and, I guess if I'm trying to be succinct about it, I would categorically summarize it as shifting everywhere, right? We've heard shift left for the better part of a decade, shift left security. This is like shift everywhere security. Security is everyone's responsibility. But similar to the pivot topic, it's not a tug of war. We can't be pulling in opposite directions just because more and more people are involved with taking steps towards security. So It is important to have kind of a source of truth, whether it be an AppSec team or a security platform that people are cooperating on, that incorporates the needs, the processes, the important information and integration with tools that each other contributing team are using, so that we can roll that into our security strategy. So, basically aligning that to the company's overall risk tolerance is really going to help us make sure that that confidence that we talked about, that doesn't reflect an acceptance of risk. It doesn't mean that the risks that we push into production are below our risk tolerance thresholds. It might mean that we didn't see it or we didn't have the ability to fix it. So at that point, it's not, you roll all that in, you ensure that you incorporate each contributing team's needs into your security structure, you integrate various security gates at different stages from production through deployment, and then you're not just saddling developers with security activities, right? You're enabling development and DevOps to be more security capable, even to the point of cultivating secure coding practices and things as they write code and select those components they bring in. And then conversely, you're alleviating that burden and that backlog that your AppSec team has to review thousands of security issues that had we simply just caught it earlier or had a more security capable team, we could have avoided that issue and that burden. So
Very cool.
Yeah. Kind of, I agree. Like, yeah, they need to have a security person, but all the enterprises or all the companies can't have the pocket to afford it. And where I will say, like, start leveraging the tools that exist in the market. Like what Stephen was trying to convey is, like, there are tools that can support you that you don't need in the today's automation and mature world. You always don't need a human eye to get your security guards up and running all the time. So you can take help the tools, you can take help of sifting left approach. And when I'm saying sifting left approach, it's not just sifting left into the pipeline. You can sift left at every nook and corner of this SDLC lifecycle so that you can reduce the leakage cost of it. I will give you an example. We use a concept called threat modeling. And I will assume it's a very common concept into the market, but we use it in our own definition of it. Most of the security analysis we do onto the first two phases of the SDLC. First is like system design, and the second is the planning and the analysis. So at the start of the system design, we do a high level of threat analysis where we run the system from upstream to the downstream and see like what are the weakest link. And into the second phase, when we are doing a detailed planning and analysis, and I loosely call it solution designing as well. In the solution designing, we try to remediate where are the weakest link of that. So first, during the system design phase, we try to do a threat modeling and find out which are the weakest link. Second phase, onto the solution designing, we try to remediate that. And that could be a human remediation, or that could be a tool-based remediation as well. And you go and implement those as a part of your DevOps pipeline or a DevSecOps pipeline, and try to sift left into your delivery so that your complete delivery is sanitized and you are trying to minimize the leakage cost of it. So I kind of disagree. Like 23% of organization doesn't have a security dedicated team. If their pockets are not allowing it, you can still have that covered by having the proper tool and the proper mechanism and proper engineering practices.
Yep. I like that. All right, Vishwa, Chuko, anything y'all want to add into that?
One thing I would like to say is that there should be, you can say, category inside SDLC which deals about pen testing and assessing the business logic. Because recently there was a crypto exchange. What happened to it? Let's say you are a solution architect. You designed a process of email retrieval, let's say, but email retrieval has a contract. You might say if anybody wants to retrieve his lost password, he will click on that I lost my password, and he will get that particular link for the resetting it. But what happens at the back? There is a contract, which contract is fulfilled by the development team. So architect gave him the contract that this needs to be signed off. So he implemented those things, but there are additionally fields that is from the first email which was created, like BCC. Okay, so what you can say attacker can do if we are not doing a pen testing and DAST. So what they can do, they can inject those BCC. Okay, what happens if you are resetting your password? Then in email you are passing just one email, right? but an attacker can make it an array of 2-3 emails. So he will make a comma and he will add 2-3 emails of his own. Once you reset your password, then the real email will go to that particular victim and to attacker also with the reset code. So he will reset it. So these are the particular scenarios where we need to think and we need to implement pen testing as a part of software lifecycle. So that's what my say on it today.
All right, good point. Pachuco, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll always convince people to always invest in a security team. Because now we're looking at it in a before scenario where you haven't actually had a cyber attack. And then we know in 2024, most cyber attacks also always leads to ransomware. So as expensive as it may be, it could be the cheaper option later in the future. So yeah, it's always it's always good to have someone, at least even if it's just one person on the team, the energy that one person would give on the team who is always focusing on digital security on every aspect of the company, down to contracts, down to planning, and even down to really simple things like he just mentioned, like password reset. Fitting that every single part of it on what even the users want. Also, we have a lot of feedback in this open source world where users want this and want that, and then the company also has to manage expectations. That person could also be involved in that, and just gives that energy, that force, where we don't have to be one step behind, because as tight as security could be today, the dev team's energy is in building, and as much as they want to follow all the standards, they would definitely leave something out. So yeah, we need to also, I think I'm going to encourage them to have that security team, that energy, to mitigate any ransomware or the worst that might happen.
Good point. It's a good point. You're going to pay for it one way or the other. That's a great point. Vishwa, Pratik, Achuko, Stephen, thank you all so much for being panelists today. Special thanks to Synopsys for sponsoring this. And we're out of time already, but some great advice for all of you out there getting started or working to build and improve security in your organization. Start early. Static, dynamic code analysis, they work, right? Have a security team, have dedicated roles. Shift everywhere. That's a new one for me. Within your life cycle, it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that we are releasing safe and secure code out into the world. So once again, I'd like to thank our panel of experts. And for any of you out there who watched this but didn't get a chance, you can download this trend report right now on DZone.com. And if you want to watch this roundtable, share it with a friend, or look at other events like this, you can visit dzone.com/events. But we ask that you don't leave just yet. Stick around for just a minute. We're always looking to improve ourselves. So please stick around and fill out a survey that'll pop up right after this. Thanks so much.